The morning sun cast long golden shadows across Maple Street as the clock tower in downtown Cedar Falls, Ohio, struck 7. The autumn air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves, and a gentle breeze rustled through the oak trees that lined the quiet neighborhood. It was the kind of morning that promised nothing extraordinary, the kind of morning that felt like every other Tuesday in this small Midwestern town. But sometimes the most ordinary days become the ones we remember forever. At Fire Station number 7, Captain Marcus Williams wiped down the gleaming red engine that had been his pride for nearly 18 years. His calloused hands moved with the practiced ease of a man who had dedicated his entire adult life to protecting his community. The brass fixtures caught the morning light, reflecting decades of service, countless emergencies, and more lives saved than Marcus could count. He paused for a moment, stretching his back and looking out at the empty street. The neighborhood was quiet this early, with most residents still enjoying their morning coffee before heading to work or school. Marcus appreciated these peaceful moments. After years of responding to emergencies at all hours, he had learned to treasure the silence. That's when he first saw her. A small figure appeared at the corner of the street, walking with deliberate steps toward the fire station. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, with tangled brown hair that fell past her thin shoulders. She wore a faded blue jacket that was clearly too large for her, the sleeves rolled up several times to free her small hands. In those hands, she carried a paper plate covered with plastic wrap. Marcus watched with curiosity as the little girl approached the station. Her sneakers, once white but now grey with wear, made soft sounds on the concrete. There was something determined in her walk, something that spoke of purpose beyond her years. She stopped at the entrance of the fire station, looking up at the large garage doors with wide brown eyes. For a moment, she seemed to hesitate, as if gathering courage for what she was about to do. Marcus set down his rag and walked toward her. His imposing frame, over 6 feet tall and built from years of carrying heavy equipment, could be intimidating. But his face softened into a gentle smile as he approached the child. "Well, good morning there," he said, his deep voice warm and welcoming. "What brings you to our fire station so early?" The little girl looked up at him, and Marcus noticed something in her eyes that made his heart pause. There was a weariness there, a heaviness that no child should carry, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I made cookies," she said simply, holding up the paper plate, "for the firefighters, because you help people." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. In all his years of service, he had received countless thank-you cards from rescued families, certificates from the city, and handshakes from grateful citizens. But something about this small girl with her homemade cookies touched him in a way he couldn't quite explain. "That's about the nicest thing anyone's done for us in a long time," he said, kneeling down to be at her eye level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she replied. "Emma Sullivan." "Well, Emma Sullivan, I'm Captain Marcus Williams, and on behalf of everyone at Fire Station 7, thank you for these cookies." He took the plate from her hands, noticing how thin her fingers were, how the sleeves of her jacket hung past her wrists, despite being rolled up. The cookies themselves were simple, round sugar cookies with slightly uneven edges that spoke of a child's handiwork. "Did you make these all by yourself?" Marcus asked. Emma nodded, a small smile appearing on her face for the first time. "Mrs. Patterson at the shelter lets me use her kitchen sometimes. She says baking is good for the soul." Before Marcus could ask more questions, Emma was already backing away. "I have to go to school now," she said, "but I'll come back tomorrow, if that's okay." "Of course it's okay," Marcus replied, still processing what she had said about a shelter. "We'd love to see you again, Emma." She gave a small wave, and then turned, walking back down Maple Street with that same determined stride. Marcus watched her until she disappeared around the corner, his mind racing with questions. Before we continue with this incredible story, if you're enjoying it so far, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life and reach more people who need to hear them. Now, let's get back to Emma's journey. Marcus carried the plate of cookies inside, where his crew was just finishing their morning briefings. The station's common room smelled of fresh coffee and the lingering scent of breakfast. 3 other firefighters sat around the large wooden table that served as the heart of their daily operations. Lieutenant Sarah Chen looked up from her paperwork, her sharp eyes immediately noticing the plate in Marcus's hands. At 42, Sarah was the second in command at Station 7 and had earned her position through years of exemplary service and an unwavering dedication to the job. "What do we have there, Captain?" she asked. "Cookies," Marcus replied, setting the plate on the table. "From a little girl named Emma. She said she made them herself." Derek Thompson, a firefighter in his late 20s with an easy smile and the kind of energy that came from youth and enthusiasm, immediately reached for the plate. "A little girl brought us cookies," he said, his face lighting up. "That's adorable. My niece is always making stuff for her teachers, but this is a first for us." James Rodriguez, the oldest member of the crew at 55 and just 3 years from retirement, leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. His graying hair and weathered face told the story of decades spent running into burning buildings while others ran out. "Kids don't usually just show up at fire stations alone," he observed, "especially not this early in the morning." Marcus nodded, pulling out a chair and sitting down heavily. "That's what I was thinking. She mentioned something about a shelter, said someone named Mrs. Patterson lets her use the kitchen." Sarah's expression shifted, understanding dawning in her eyes. "The Patterson shelter on Oakwood Avenue?" "Could be," Marcus replied. "She was wearing clothes that were too big for her, and there was something about the way she carried herself, like she was older than her years, you know." The crew fell silent for a moment, each of them processing the implications. In their line of work, they had seen poverty and hardship up close. They had responded to calls in the poorest neighborhoods, witnessed families losing everything to fires, and helped communities rebuild after disasters. But somehow, the image of this small girl bringing cookies to their station struck a different chord. "What do we know about the Patterson shelter?" Derek asked. Sarah pulled out her phone and began searching. "It's a transitional housing facility for families. They provide temporary housing, meals, and support services for people experiencing homelessness. Opened about 5 years ago, after the old textile factory closed and a lot of families lost their income." Marcus thought about Emma's determined walk, her simple explanation that firefighters help people, and the pride with which she had presented her cookies. There was a resilience in that child that demanded attention. "She said she'd come back tomorrow," he said quietly. True to her word, Emma appeared at the fire station the following morning at precisely the same time. The October sun was hidden behind grey clouds that threatened rain, and she wore the same oversized blue jacket. This time, she carried a small paper bag instead of a plate. Marcus was waiting for her, having positioned himself near the entrance under the pretense of checking equipment. When he saw her approaching, he felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. "Good morning, Emma," he called out. Her face brightened at being remembered. "Good morning, Captain Williams. I brought muffins today. Mrs. Patterson had blueberries." She handed him the bag, and Marcus peered inside to find 4 slightly misshapen but clearly homemade blueberry muffins. They were still warm. "These smell wonderful," he said genuinely. "Would you like to come inside for a minute, meet the rest of the crew?" Emma hesitated, glancing at the open doors of the station. "I don't want to be a bother." "You could never be a bother," Marcus assured her. "In fact, the guys have been talking about your cookies since yesterday. They're hoping to meet the talented baker." A shy smile crossed Emma's face and she nodded. Marcus led her inside, one large hand hovering protectively near her shoulder without actually touching her. The common room fell quiet as they entered. Sarah, Derek, and James looked up, their expressions shifting from curiosity to warmth as they saw the small girl. "Everyone, this is Emma," Marcus announced. "She's the one who made those delicious cookies yesterday, and today she's brought us blueberry muffins." Derek was the first to his feet, dropping to one knee so he was at her eye level. "Emma, those cookies were amazing. I had 2 of them before anyone else got a chance. Thank you so much." Emma's cheeks flushed with pleasure. "You're welcome." Sarah approached more slowly, her maternal instincts recognizing something in the child that needed careful handling. "Emma, would you like some hot chocolate? It's chilly out there this morning." The offer seemed to catch Emma off guard. She looked at Marcus as if seeking permission, and he nodded encouragingly. "That would be nice," Emma said softly. For the next 20 minutes, Emma sat at the large wooden table with a mug of hot chocolate warming her hands, answering questions from the firefighters with a maturity that belied her age. She was 7, she confirmed, and in 2nd grade at Lincoln Elementary. She liked reading and math, and her favorite color was yellow because it was happy. She carefully avoided any questions about her family or living situation, redirecting conversations with the skill of someone who had learned to protect herself. The firefighters noticed but didn't press, sensing that trust had to be earned. When Emma said she needed to leave for school, Sarah walked her to the door. "Emma," she said gently, "do you walk to school by yourself?" Emma nodded. "It's not far, just 6 blocks. "And the fire station is on your way?" Another nod. "I pass by every morning. That's how I knew you were here. I've been watching for weeks." Sarah's heart clenched at the image of this small girl watching from a distance, gathering courage to approach. "Well, we're very glad you finally said hello. You're welcome here any time." Emma looked up at her with those old soul eyes. "I know, that's why I came." After she left, the crew gathered in the common room with a heaviness that hung in the air. "She's living in a shelter," James said, stating what everyone was thinking. "A 7-year-old walking to school by herself, bringing us baked goods she made with whatever ingredients she could find." "We need to find out more," Sarah said, carefully without overstepping. "If she's in the system, there are protocols." Marcus nodded slowly. "But first, we need to earn her trust. She's smart, and she's been through something. We push too hard, we'll scare her off." "So what do we do?" Derek asked. "We let her come," Marcus replied. "We let her bring her cookies and her muffins, and we make her feel safe, and we pay attention. Eventually she'll tell us what she needs us to know." The days that followed fell into a pattern. Every morning, without fail, Emma appeared at Fire Station 7 with something she had baked. Sometimes it was cookies, sometimes muffins, sometimes simple bread rolls that Mrs. Patterson had helped her with. She never came empty-handed, as if the baked goods were her ticket of admission, her way of earning her place. The firefighters began to look forward to her visits with an eagerness that surprised them. They would save her a spot at the table, make sure there was hot chocolate ready, and listen as she shared small pieces of her world. They learned that she loved butterflies because they could fly anywhere they wanted. They learned that her teacher, Miss Rodriguez, was kind and never made her feel different for not having new clothes. They learned that she was reading a book about a girl who lived in a boxcar, and she didn't think it was so bad because at least the children had each other. What they didn't learn, what Emma carefully kept hidden, was the truth of her situation. 2 weeks after her first visit, something changed. Emma arrived at the station later than usual, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Her jacket was damp from an early morning rain, and she wasn't carrying any baked goods. Marcus felt his concern spike as he greeted her at the door. "Good morning, Emma. Everything okay?" She looked up at him, and for the first time her carefully constructed composure seemed to crack. "I couldn't make anything today. I'm sorry. Mrs. Patterson wasn't feeling well, and I didn't want to bother her." "You don't need to bring us anything," Marcus said firmly, guiding her inside. "You're welcome here regardless. Do you understand that?" Emma nodded, but there was uncertainty in her movement. Sarah had already spotted them and was approaching with a blanket from the supply closet. She wrapped it around Emma's thin shoulders without asking, then led her to the table where a warm bowl of oatmeal was waiting. "We made extra this morning," Sarah said, which was a lie. She had made it specifically for Emma when she saw the weather forecast the night before. "You'd be doing us a favor by eating it." Emma looked at the oatmeal, then at the faces of the firefighters around her, and something in her seemed to release. She ate every bite while the crew pretended to go about their morning routines, giving her space while keeping watch. It was Derek who finally sat down across from her, his usual cheerful demeanor softened into something more serious. "Emma," he said, "I know we haven't known each other very long, but I want you to know something. Whatever you're dealing with, you don't have to deal with it alone. That's what community means. We help each other." Emma set down her spoon and looked at him with eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. "My mom is sick," she said quietly. "Really sick. She's been in the hospital for 3 weeks. They say she might not get better." The words hung in the air, heavy and painful. "And your dad?" Sarah asked gently. Emma shook her head. "He left when I was a baby. It's always just been me and Mom." "Who's taking care of you now?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Mrs. Patterson looks after me," Emma replied. "But the shelter isn't for kids by themselves. She's been hiding me, kind of, letting me sleep in the back room so I don't get sent away. But someone from the government came yesterday asking questions. I think they know." The firefighters exchanged glances, loaded with concern and determination. This wasn't a problem they could solve with hoses and ladders, but it was a problem nonetheless, and they weren't the kind of people who walked away from those in need. "Emma," Marcus said, "you did something very brave by telling us this, and I want you to know that we're going to help you. I don't know exactly how yet, but we're going to figure it out together." For the first time since she started visiting the station, Emma's eyes filled with tears. She didn't cry, not fully, but the tears gathered at the edges, threatening to spill. "I don't want to go away," she whispered. "I want to stay here near Mom. What if she wakes up and I'm not here?" Sarah moved around the table and wrapped her arms around the small girl, holding her the way she held her own children when they were frightened. "You're not going anywhere," she promised. "Not if we have anything to say about it." The afternoon of that same day, Marcus made a phone call to someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Linda Martinez was a social worker with the county, someone he had known since high school. They had dated briefly in their 20s before realizing they were better as friends, and while life had taken them in different directions, the connection remained. "Marcus Williams," Linda said when she answered. "I was wondering when you'd finally call me about something other than a work emergency." "This is a work emergency," Marcus replied, "just not the kind either of us is used to." He explained the situation, giving Linda everything he knew about Emma Sullivan. The shelter, the sick mother, the fear of being sent away. Linda listened without interrupting, her professional mind already working through the possibilities. "The situation is complicated," she said when he finished. "If her mother is incapacitated and there's no other family, Emma technically should be in foster care. The fact that she's been staying at a shelter without proper supervision could trigger an emergency placement." "Which would mean she'd be taken away," Marcus said. "It could, unless we can find a better solution." "What kind of solution?" Linda paused. "Let me make some calls. I'll need to see the mother's situation, talk to her doctors, find out what the prognosis really is, and I'll need to meet Emma. Can you arrange that?" I'll figure it out, Marcus said. One more thing, Marcus. I know you. You're already emotionally invested in this kid. That's not a bad thing, but you need to be prepared. These cases don't always end the way we want them to. Marcus thought about Emma's determined walk, her homemade cookies, and the way she had said she watched the fire station for weeks before gathering the courage to approach. Some endings, he said, we have to make happen ourselves. The meeting with Linda took place 3 days later at the fire station. Emma was nervous, sitting straight in her chair with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sarah sat beside her, a steadying presence, while Marcus and Linda sat across the table. Linda was a woman in her 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had been a social worker for over 20 years and had seen every kind of family situation imaginable. But something about Emma's quiet dignity touched her. "Emma," Linda began, her voice gentle but professional, "I'm here to help, not to hurt. I know you're scared, and that's completely understandable. But I need you to be honest with me so I can figure out the best way forward. Can you do that?" Emma looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked at Marcus, who gave her a small smile. "Yes, ma'am," Emma said. "Good. Now, I've been to see your mother at the hospital. She's a strong woman, Emma. She talked about you the entire time I was there, even though it was hard for her to speak." Emma's eyes widened. "You saw my mom?" "I did, and she wanted me to tell you something. She said you're the bravest girl she's ever known, and she's so proud of the person you're becoming." Tears slipped down Emma's cheeks, but she didn't look away. "Is she going to be okay?" Linda took a breath. "She's fighting, Emma. That's all any of us can do. But she needs time to heal, and that time is going to take a while. Months, maybe longer. Which means we need to figure out where you're going to live while she gets better." Emma's body tensed. "I can stay at the shelter. Mrs. Patterson takes care of me." "Mrs. Patterson is a wonderful person," Linda acknowledged, "but the shelter isn't equipped to care for a child long term. It's not safe or legal. We need to find you a proper home." "I don't want to go to a foster home," Emma said, her voice rising with panic. "I've heard stories. They split you up from your family. They send you far away. I'll never see my mom again." Linda reached across the table and placed her hand over Emma's clasped ones. "That's not going to happen. I promise you, that's not going to happen. Your mother is still your mother, and no one is going to take that away. But you need a safe place to stay while she recovers. A place where you'll be cared for, where you can go to school, where you can visit your mom regularly." "Where?" Emma asked. Linda looked at Marcus. "That's what we're trying to figure out." After the meeting, when Emma had been taken to visit her mother at the hospital by Sarah, Marcus sat with Linda in his office. The room was small and functional, with filing cabinets against one wall and a window overlooking the apparatus bay. "What are the options?" Marcus asked. Linda sighed. "Not many. There's no extended family on record. The father is listed as unknown on the birth certificate. Without a relative or close family friend willing to step up, foster care is the default." "What about emergency foster placement? Someone local, someone who could keep her in the same school near her mother?" "Those placements exist, but they're in high demand. There's a waiting list, and even if we found someone, they'd need to be vetted, certified. That takes time we might not have." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the fire engine that had been his companion for nearly 2 decades. He thought about his own life, his small house on the other side of town that was too big for just one person. He thought about the marriage that had ended 10 years ago, the children he'd never had, the quiet evenings that stretched into quieter nights. "Well, what if I did it?" he said. Linda looked at him sharply. "What?" "Well, what if I became her foster parent, temporarily until her mother recovers? I have a spare bedroom. I'm certified in first aid, obviously. I know how to cook, sort of. And Emma trusts me. That has to count for something." "Marcus, this isn't a cat you can adopt on impulse. Fostering a child is an enormous responsibility. Your work hours are unpredictable. You're single. You've never raised a child before. I know all that, Marcus replied, but I also know that this girl needs someone who cares about her, someone who won't let her fall through the cracks. I've spent my whole life saving strangers. Maybe it's time I saved someone I actually know. Linda studied him for a long moment, seeing something in his face that she had seen before in the families who came through her office. The ones who made it work weren't always the ones who had everything figured out. They were the ones who refused to give up. It would take time, she said finally. Background checks, home inspection, training courses, and even then the judge would have to approve it. How much time? Weeks, maybe a month if we push. And what happens to Emma in the meantime? Linda's expression was pained. Temporary placement, a group home most likely, until we can sort out something permanent. Marcus shook his head. That's not good enough. Marcus, I understand your frustration, but there are rules, protocols. They exist to protect children like Emma. And sometimes, Marcus countered, they hurt them. There has to be another way. Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping. There is one possibility. It's not strictly by the book, but it might work. If Mrs. Patterson were to be designated as an emergency guardian, just temporarily while your application is processed, Emma could stay at the shelter legally. It would require some creative paperwork and a sympathetic judge, but I've seen it done before. Can you make it happen? Linda looked at him with something like admiration in her eyes. For a kid like Emma, with people like you fighting for her, I can try. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Mrs. Patterson, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with a heart of pure gold, agreed to take on the role of emergency guardian. She had been caring for Emma informally for months and was relieved to have a legal framework that allowed her to continue. Meanwhile, Marcus began the process of becoming a certified foster parent. He attended parenting classes in the evenings, met with social workers for home inspections, and filled out more paperwork than he had in his entire career as a fire captain. His crew stepped up to cover shifts when needed, understanding without being told that something important was happening. Emma continued to visit the fire station every morning, but something had changed. There was a lightness in her step, a hope in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She knew people were fighting for her, and that knowledge alone seemed to give her strength. One morning, she arrived with a plate of perfectly shaped cookies, decorated with colored icing in the shapes of fire trucks and flames. Mrs. Patterson helped me with the icing, she explained, presenting them proudly, but I did the baking all by myself. Derek immediately claimed 2, declaring them the best cookies he'd ever tasted. James photographed them for his grandchildren. Sarah took one home for her own kids. Marcus took his cookie and studied it carefully. The fire truck was a little lopsided, the red icing slightly uneven, but it was unmistakably made with love. "This is beautiful, Emma," he said. She beamed at him. "I wanted to say thank you for everything you're doing. Mrs. Patterson told me about the foster stuff, about how you want me to come live with you." Marcus set down the cookie and met her eyes. "How do you feel about that?" Emma considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Scared," she admitted, "but also happy. Is that weird?" "No," Marcus said. "That's exactly right." "What if you change your mind?" Emma asked, the fear creeping back into her voice. "What if I'm too much trouble and you decide you don't want me anymore?" Marcus knelt down so he was at her eye level, the same way he had on that first morning when she showed up with her paper plate of cookies. "Emma, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to remember it. You are not trouble. You are not a burden. You are a brave, kind, remarkable young lady, and anyone would be lucky to have you in their life. I'm not changing my mind. I'm not going anywhere. As long as you want me in your corner, I'll be there." Emma looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any hint of dishonesty. Finding none, she did something she had never done before. She stepped forward and wrapped her thin arms around his neck, holding on tight. Marcus held her back, this small girl who had walked into his fire station with cookies and walked into his heart with her courage. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know if her mother would recover, if the foster application would be approved, or what the future held. But in that moment, holding Emma while his crew pretended not to watch with suspiciously moist eyes, he knew one thing for certain. Some fires you fight with water, and some you fight with love. The foster application moved faster than anyone expected. Linda pulled strings, called in favors, and advocated fiercely for Marcus and Emma at every turn. The judge, a family court veteran named Helen Park, was impressed by the unusual circumstances, the community support, and Marcus's obvious commitment. 1 month and 3 days after that first meeting, Judge Park signed the order, making Marcus Williams the temporary foster parent of Emma Sullivan. The crew at Station 7 threw a small celebration, complete with a cake that Sarah had ordered from the best bakery in town. Emma insisted on helping decorate, adding her own touch with sprinkles and chocolate chips. "This is the best day ever," she declared, surveying her handiwork. "Not quite yet," Marcus said, checking his watch. "We have somewhere to be." Emma looked at him curiously, but he just smiled and grabbed his jacket. They drove across town to Cedar Falls General Hospital, where Emma's mother, Rachel Sullivan, had been a patient for nearly 2 months. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic in recent weeks, noting small but steady improvements in her condition. Marcus had been visiting regularly, getting to know the woman who had raised such an extraordinary child. Rachel was weak, her voice barely above a whisper, but her eyes held the same determined spark that he recognized in Emma. When they arrived at the hospital room, Emma ran to her mother's bedside, careful not to jostle any of the tubes and wires that still surrounded her. "Mom, guess what? Captain Williams is my foster dad now. The judge said so and everything." Rachel looked at her daughter, then at Marcus, standing in the doorway with his hands in his pockets. Tears slipped down her pale cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for taking care of my baby." Marcus stepped closer. "She's been taking care of us, actually. You raised an incredible kid, Rachel." "She got that from you," Emma said to her mother. "That's what Mrs. Patterson says. She says I'm just like you." Rachel smiled weakly. "Then God help Captain Williams." They all laughed, and in that hospital room, surrounded by the beeps of monitors and the smell of antiseptic, something like a family began to form. The transition to life with Marcus was not without its challenges. Emma had never lived in a house before, having spent her early years in a series of apartments and shelters. She didn't know what to do with a room of her own, and for the first week, she slept on the floor because the bed felt too soft. Marcus learned quickly that parenting required skills they didn't teach at the fire academy. Cooking dinner for one was easy. Cooking for a 7-year-old with specific opinions about vegetables was an entirely different matter. Helping with homework that he hadn't thought about in decades was humbling. And navigating the emotional needs of a child who had experienced trauma required patience and sensitivity that pushed him to grow. But they figured it out together. Emma taught him about her favorite books, and Marcus introduced her to classic movies. She showed him how to make cookies from scratch, and he taught her how to change a tire. They developed routines, breakfast at the kitchen table, walking to school together when his schedule allowed, dinner recaps about their respective days. The crew at Station 7 became an extended family. Derek, who had a niece around Emma's age, became her favorite for games and jokes. James, approaching retirement and missing his own grandchildren, told her stories about the old days of firefighting. And Sarah, with her own children and maternal instincts, made sure Emma always had someone to talk to about the things she couldn't share with Marcus. 3 months into the arrangement, On a cold December evening, Emma approached Marcus with a question that had clearly been weighing on her. Can I ask you something?" she said, sitting on the couch beside him. "Always," Marcus replied, muting the television. "Why did you do it? I mean, you didn't know me. I was just some kid with cookies. Why did you decide to take care of me?" Marcus considered the question carefully. Emma deserved an honest answer. "You know, when I first became a firefighter, I thought the job was about saving people, running into buildings, pulling them out of danger, being the hero. And don't get me wrong, that part is important. But after a while, I realized something. The really important work isn't just about the big rescues. It's about the small moments. Checking on elderly neighbors, teaching kids about fire safety. Being there when people need someone, even if they can't ask." He paused, looking at Emma's attentive face. "When you showed up at the station with your cookies, you weren't asking for help. You were giving it. You saw us, thought about us, and decided we deserved something nice. That kind of kindness, that kind of thoughtfulness, it's rare. And I knew, right then, that you were someone special, someone worth fighting for." Emma was quiet for a moment. "So it wasn't because you felt sorry for me?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "Feeling sorry doesn't change anything. I did this because you inspired me. Because you showed me that courage isn't just about running into fires. Sometimes it's about walking up to strangers with a plate of cookies and saying hello." Emma leaned against his arm, her small body warm against his side. "I'm glad I did it, even though I was scared." "Me too, kid, me too." Winter gave way to spring, and with it came changes no one had anticipated. Rachel Sullivan, against all medical predictions, began to recover. The infection that had ravaged her body responded to a new treatment, and slowly, day by day, she grew stronger. Emma visited her mother every week, bringing drawings and stories from school, updates about life with Marcus, and always, always cookies. Rachel lived for these visits, saving her energy so she could be fully present for her daughter. By April, the doctors were talking about discharge. Rachel would need extensive physical therapy and ongoing treatment, but she could continue her recovery at home. The only question was, where would home be? Marcus had been thinking about this for weeks, turning it over in his mind during quiet moments at the station. His house had 3 bedrooms, including the one Emma had made her own. The 3rd bedroom, currently used as storage, could be converted. It wouldn't be easy having both of them there, adjusting to yet another new normal. But the alternative, sending Emma and Rachel off to start over somewhere else, felt wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. He broached the subject with Rachel during one of his solo visits to the hospital. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting in the chair beside her bed. "When you're discharged, you're going to need support. Help with the day-to-day stuff while you recover." Rachel looked at him warily. "I've been thinking about that too. I was going to ask if you could keep Emma for a little longer, just until I'm back on my feet." "Actually, I had a different idea. What if you both stayed? At the house, I mean. I have the room. It makes sense logistically, and Emma wouldn't have to adjust to another new situation." Rachel was silent for a long moment. "That's too much. You've already done so much." "I've done what anyone would do." "No," Rachel said firmly. "You've done what very few people would do. You took in a child who wasn't yours, loved her like she was, and never asked for anything in return. I can never repay that." "I'm not asking for repayment. I'm asking you to consider an arrangement that works for everyone. Emma gets to stay in her school, keep her friends, keep her routine. You get the support you need during recovery, and I get to not rattle around in that big house by myself anymore." Rachel studied his face, looking for hidden motives and finding none. "Why are you really doing this?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering the question. "Before Emma came into my life, I had a routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. It was fine, functional. But it wasn't much of a life. These past few months with Emma, I've laughed more than I have in years. I felt more connected to the world, more present. She didn't just bring cookies to the fire station, she brought life. He met Rachel's eyes directly. I know you're her mother, and that's never going to change. I'm not trying to replace you or take your place, but I've come to care about that kid like she's my own, and by extension, I care about you. Let me help, please. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were different. Relief, gratitude, maybe even the beginning of something like hope. "Okay," she whispered, "okay." The homecoming took place on a Saturday in late May, almost exactly 8 months after Emma had first appeared at Fire Station 7 with her plate of cookies. Marcus had spent the week preparing, converting the spare bedroom into a space for Rachel, stocking the kitchen with food she could easily eat during her recovery, and making sure Emma understood what was about to happen. "She's going to be different," Marcus had explained. "Weaker than you remember. She might get tired easily or need to rest a lot, but she's still your mom, and she loves you more than anything in the world." Emma had nodded solemnly. "I know, I've been visiting her. I'll take care of her." "You don't have to take care of anyone," Marcus said. "That's my job. Your job is to be a kid. Go to school, play with your friends, eat too much ice cream, let the adults handle the adult stuff." "But I can still bake, right? Mom loves my cookies." Marcus smiled. "You can bake as much as you want." When the car pulled up to the house, Emma was waiting on the porch, bouncing on her toes with barely contained excitement. Sarah had helped her make a welcome home banner that hung above the door, slightly crooked but full of love. Marcus helped Rachel out of the car, supporting her weight as she navigated on unsteady legs. She was thin, still recovering, but there was color in her cheeks and life in her eyes. Emma flew down the steps and into her mother's arms, careful not to knock her over. Rachel held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her after so many months of separation. "I missed you, Mom," Emma said, her voice muffled against Rachel's shoulder. "I missed you too, baby, every single day." They stood there for a long moment, mother and daughter reunited, while Marcus watched with a heart so full it ached. The crew from Station 7 had gathered inside for a small welcome party. Derek had brought balloons, James had baked a lasagna, following a recipe Sarah had given him, and the house was filled with warmth and laughter. Rachel was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. These people, who had been strangers just months ago, had become family. They had wrapped themselves around her daughter when she couldn't, and they had fought for a future that none of them were certain would come. "I don't know how to thank you all," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "What you've done for Emma, for both of us, it's more than I can ever repay." "You don't have to repay anything," Sarah said. "That's what family does. And whether you like it or not, you're part of this crazy family now." Life in the Williams household settled into a new rhythm. Rachel's recovery was slow but steady, marked by physical therapy appointments and gradual improvements. She took over the cooking when her strength allowed, filling the house with aromas that reminded Emma of happier times. Marcus adjusted his schedule to be home more, using vacation days he had accumulated over decades. He learned things about Rachel that he hadn't known, like her love of old jazz music and her sharp sense of humor that emerged as her health returned. And Emma, finally freed from the weight of worry that had pressed on her for so long, bloomed. Her grades improved. She made friends at school who came over for playdates. She joined a baking club and started entering her cookies in local competitions. One evening in midsummer, as the sun set in brilliant oranges and pinks, the three of them sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "This is nice," Emma said, leaning against her mother's side, "just us being together." "It is nice," Rachel agreed, "the nicest thing I can imagine." Marcus sat in his rocking chair, a glass of lemonade sweating in the summer heat. He looked at the woman and child who had become his family, feeling a contentment he hadn't known he was missing until he found it. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about something." Rachel and Emma both looked at him expectantly. "This foster arrangement is temporary. Officially, I mean. Now that Rachel is getting better, the court will eventually want to reconsider the custody situation." Emma's face clouded with worry. "What does that mean?" "It means we have some decisions to make, as a family." He emphasized the last word, watching as Rachel's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "What kind of decisions?" Rachel asked. "Well, the way I see it, we have a few options. One, Rachel recovers fully, gets her own place, and Emma goes back to living with just her mom. Two, we stay exactly as we are, maybe make the foster arrangement more permanent. Or three—" He paused, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first fire. "Three, we make this official. All of it. We become a real family in every sense of the word." Silence fell over the porch. Emma looked between the two adults, trying to understand what was being said. Rachel stared at Marcus, her heart racing. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" she asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I'm honestly not sure what I'm saying. I just know that these past months have been the best of my life. I know that I love that kid like she's my own. And I know that I've come to care about you, Rachel, in ways I wasn't expecting. Maybe it's too soon. Maybe I'm reading this all wrong. But I had to say something, because the thought of you two leaving, of going back to the way things were before, it's not something I can face without at least trying." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and lit up her face. "You're not reading it wrong," she said, "and for the record, it's not too soon, not after everything we've been through." Emma looked back and forth between them, her young mind working to catch up. "Wait, does this mean we're staying for good?" Marcus looked at Rachel, who nodded. "Yeah, kiddo," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "for good." Emma's face split into the biggest grin either of them had ever seen. She jumped up from the porch swing and threw herself at Marcus, hugging him tight. "You're going to be my dad," she said, "a real dad." Marcus held her close, feeling tears prick at his eyes. "Only if you want me to be." "I do," Emma said firmly. "I wanted it from the first day. That's why I brought you cookies. Mrs. Patterson said the way to a man's heart is through his stomach." Rachel and Marcus both laughed, the tension breaking into something warmer and more hopeful. "Mrs. Patterson is a wise woman," Rachel said. "The wisest," Emma agreed. The wedding took place in October, exactly 1 year after Emma had first appeared at Fire Station 7 with her homemade cookies. It was a small ceremony, held in the backyard of the house that had become their home. The entire crew from Station 7 attended, along with Mrs. Patterson, Linda the social worker, and friends and neighbors who had watched the story unfold. Emma served as flower girl, scattering yellow petals down the aisle because yellow was happy. She wore a white dress that Sarah had helped her pick out and shoes that actually fit, a far cry from the oversized jacket and worn sneakers she had worn the day she changed all their lives. Rachel walked down the aisle on James's arm, since he had become something of a grandfather figure to Emma and a trusted friend to Rachel. She wore a simple cream-colored dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. Marcus waited at the makeshift altar, wearing his dress uniform with all his commendations pinned to his chest. Beside him stood Derek as best man, nervously holding the rings. The ceremony was short and heartfelt. Judge Park, who had originally approved the foster arrangement, had agreed to officiate. Her words were simple but profound. "Marriage," she said, "is not just a union between two people. It's a declaration that you will face life together, that you will weather the storms and celebrate the sunshine, that you will build something greater than either of you could create alone. Marcus and Rachel, you have already done this. You have already proven your commitment, your courage, and your love. Today we simply make it official." When Marcus and Rachel exchanged their vows, Emma stood between them, holding both their hands. They had written special words just for her. "Emma," Marcus said, "when you walked into my fire station with a plate of cookies, you didn't just bring baked goods. You brought hope. You brought purpose. You brought a family I didn't know I was missing. I promise to love you, protect you, and be there for you, not because I have to, but because I can't imagine my life without you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, Captain Williams." "You can call me Dad now, kid." "I love you too, Dad." Rachel added her own words. "Emma, you are the bravest person I know. You took care of me when I couldn't take care of myself, even when you were just a little girl. You found us help when we needed it most. You never gave up, not on me, not on us. I am so proud to be your mother, and so grateful for the family you helped us build." When the ceremony concluded, and Marcus and Rachel shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the gathering erupted in cheers, but no one cheered louder than Emma, who jumped up and down with pure, unbridled joy. The reception was held in the fire station, which had been decorated with streamers and fairy lights. The food was potluck, with everyone contributing something special. And in the center of the dessert table, made by Emma herself with only minimal help from Mrs. Patterson, was a three-tiered wedding cake topped with a model fire truck. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Emma found Marcus alone for a moment, standing by engine 7. "Dad?" she said, still testing out the word. "Yeah, Em." "Thank you for saving us." Marcus knelt down, as he had done on that first morning nearly a year ago. "You got it backward, kiddo. You saved us." Emma shook her head. "Mrs. Patterson says we saved each other. She says that's what family is, people saving each other over and over again." Marcus considered this, thinking about the small acts of courage and kindness that had brought them to this moment. The cookies, the trust, the love. "Mrs. Patterson is a very wise woman," he said. "The wisest," Emma agreed. They stood together in the fire station, father and daughter, looking out at the future that stretched before them. It wouldn't always be easy, Marcus knew. There would be challenges and setbacks, arguments and growing pains. But there would also be laughter and love, Sunday morning pancakes and Friday night movies, homework help and baking experiments. There would be family. The next morning, as the sun rose over Cedar Falls, Emma was already awake. She crept downstairs to find Marcus in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast while Rachel slept in. "Can I help?" Emma asked. "I was hoping you would. I'm pretty sure I burned the first batch of pancakes." Emma assessed the damage with a critical eye. "Yeah, those are definitely burned. Here, let me show you. Mrs. Patterson taught me a secret." They worked together, Emma directing and Marcus following her instructions. By the time Rachel came downstairs, drawn by the smell of actual edible food, there was a plate of perfect golden pancakes on the table. "These are amazing," Rachel said after her first bite. "When did you learn to cook, Marcus?" "I had a good teacher," he replied, winking at Emma. Emma grinned, her face smeared with flour. "We're a team now. That's what families do." Rachel reached over and took her daughter's hand, then Marcus's. "That's exactly what families do." After breakfast, as was now their Sunday tradition, the three of them walked together to the fire station. The crew was used to their visits by now, and there was always coffee for the adults and hot chocolate for Emma. But this Sunday was different. This Sunday, Emma carried a large platter covered with foil. "What have you got there, kid?" Derek asked as they entered. Emma set the platter on the common room table and carefully removed the foil. Inside were dozens of cookies, each one decorated with intricate designs. Fire trucks, flames, the number 7, and little houses. "I made these for everyone," Emma announced, "to say thank you for helping us, for becoming our family." The firefighters gathered around, each taking a cookie and examining the careful decoration. "These are incredible," Sarah said. "You've gotten so good, Emma." I had a lot of practice, Emma replied, and a lot of people who believed in me. James raised his cookie and a toast. To Emma, he said, the best thing that ever happened to Station 7. To Emma, the others echoed. Marcus watched his daughter, basking in the love and appreciation of her extended family. He thought about everything that had led to this moment, the chain of small decisions and acts of kindness that had brought them together. He thought about a little girl who had watched a fire station for weeks before gathering the courage to approach. He thought about homemade cookies, imperfect but made with love. He thought about the bravery it takes to trust people when the world has given you every reason not to. And he thought about the power of community, of strangers becoming family, of love in its most unexpected forms. Years later, when Emma was grown and living her own life, she would look back on that first visit to the fire station as the moment everything changed. She would tell the story to her own children, emphasizing the lesson she had learned at 7 years old. Everyone needs help sometimes, and everyone has something to give, even if all you have is a plate of cookies and the courage to share them. The fire station on Maple Street still stands today, and if you happen to pass by on a Sunday morning, you might see something unusual. A platter of cookies on the common room table, a family gathered around laughing and talking, and a small brass plaque by the entrance that reads, "In honor of Emma Sullivan Williams, who taught us that bravery comes in many forms." Because that's the thing about fires. They can destroy, but they can also forge. They can consume, but they can also illuminate. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, a fire will lead you exactly where you need to be. For Marcus, Rachel, and Emma, that place was home. And they lived there together, saving each other over and over again for the rest of their days. The autumn leaves had begun to turn again, painting the streets of Cedar Falls in shades of amber and gold when Emma celebrated her 10th birthday. 3 years had passed since that first day at the fire station. 3 years of growth and change and love. The birthday party was held at Station 7, of course. It had become tradition. Derek had organized a scavenger hunt through the apparatus bay, James had constructed an elaborate treasure map, and Sarah had coordinated with the local bakery for a cake in the shape of a giant cookie. But the real surprise came after the candles were blown out. "Emma," Marcus said, standing before the gathered crowd of family and friends, "we have something to give you, something we've been working on for a while." He handed her an envelope, worn from being handled many times. Emma opened it carefully, pulling out a single sheet of paper covered in official stamps and signatures. "What is this?" she asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Read it," Rachel encouraged. Emma's lips moved as she parsed the legal language, and then her eyes went wide. "Adoption papers," she whispered. "Finalized, Emma Sullivan Williams." She looked up at Marcus. "I'm officially, legally, forever your daughter." "Forever and always, kiddo." Emma launched herself at him so hard he staggered backward, wrapping her arms around his neck and crying the good kind of tears. The party erupted in cheers and applause, and even the toughest firefighters in the room weren't too proud to wipe their eyes. Later, when the party had wound down and the guests had gone home, Emma sat on the floor of the common room, surrounded by wrapping paper and presents. Marcus and Rachel sat nearby, tired but content. "Dad?" Emma said. "Yeah, Em. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't brought those cookies that first day?" Marcus considered the question. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it. The past is the past. What matters is what we do with the present." "But if you had to guess?" "I think," Marcus said slowly, "that some things are meant to be. Not in a magical way, just in a this is how life works sort of way. People need each other. Communities need connection. And when someone reaches out, when someone has the courage to say hello, things can change. You had that courage, Emma. At 7 years old, with nothing but some cookies and a dream, you had more courage than most people show in a lifetime. Emma was quiet for a moment. I was really scared, though. That's what courage is, being scared and doing it anyway. Rachel added, "You know, I used to worry about you all the time. When I got sick, my biggest fear wasn't dying, it was leaving you alone, not knowing who would take care of you. But even at your lowest, you found a way. You found people who would love you, who would fight for you. You did that, Emma, not me, not anyone else. You." Emma looked at her mother, understanding something for the first time. "Is that why you got better? Because you knew I was okay?" Rachel's eyes shimmered with tears. "It's part of it. The doctors helped, obviously, but knowing you were safe, knowing you were loved, it gave me something to fight for. You saved my life, baby, just like you saved his." She nodded toward Marcus, who pretended to be very interested in a piece of wrapping paper. "We saved each other," Emma said firmly. "That's what Mrs. Patterson always says, and she's the wisest." "The wisest?" Marcus and Rachel agreed in unison. As Emma grew older, she never forgot the lessons of her childhood. She graduated from high school with honors, her speech focusing on the importance of community and reaching out to those in need. She went to college, studying social work, and eventually returned to Cedar Falls to work at the very same shelter where Mrs. Patterson had once hidden her in a back room. Mrs. Patterson had passed away by then, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83, but her legacy lived on. The shelter had expanded, offering more services to more families, and Emma had become its director. She instituted a new program, one that had never existed before. It was called the Cookie Connection, and its mission was simple: identify children in crisis and connect them with community resources before they fell through the cracks. Fire stations, police departments, libraries, and schools all participated, training their staff to recognize the signs and respond with compassion. "The thing about kids in trouble," Emma explained at the program's launch event, "is that they rarely ask for help directly. They're too scared, too proud, or too conditioned to believe that no one cares. But they reach out in other ways. They show up at places they feel safe. They bring small gifts like they're earning the right to be there. They watch from a distance, gathering courage." She paused, looking out at the audience of community leaders and volunteers. "When I was 7 years old, I brought cookies to a fire station, not because I wanted cookies in return, but because I wanted someone to see me, to know I existed, to care. And the people at that fire station, they saw me. They cared. They changed my life." Her voice caught, and she took a moment to compose herself. "Every child deserves that. Every child deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. That's what the Cookie Connection is about. Not the cookies themselves, but what they represent. Reaching out, being brave, finding community." The program was a massive success. Within 5 years, it had expanded to 17 states, and Emma was invited to speak at conferences and events across the country. But she always came home to Cedar Falls, to the house on the quiet street, to the fire station on Maple Street. Marcus had retired by then, finally hanging up his helmet after 40 years of service. Rachel was healthy, running a small catering business that specialized in, what else? Cookies. They were the secret weapon of the Cookie Connection, providing baked goods for events and training sessions. On the 10th anniversary of Emma's first visit to the fire station, the whole community gathered for a celebration. Current and former firefighters, social workers, volunteers, and families who had been helped by the Cookie Connection all came together to honor the woman who had started it all. The fire station was decked out in yellow streamers and balloons because yellow was happy. A banner stretched across the front entrance reading, "10 years of cookies, 10 years of community, 10 years of love." Emma stood before the crowd, Now a confident woman in her mid-30s, her childhood struggles evident only in the depth and compassion of her gaze. 28 years ago, she began, I was a scared little girl with nowhere to go. I had a sick mother, no home, and no idea how I was going to survive. But I had one thing, hope, and I had a plate of cookies. Laughter rippled through the audience. I know it sounds simple, even silly. Cookies? That's your story? But here's what I've learned. The small gestures matter. The cookies weren't about the food. They were about connection. They were about saying, I see you. I value you. I want to be part of your world. She looked out at the crowd, finding familiar faces. Marcus and Rachel in the front row, beaming with pride. Derek, now a captain himself, with his arm around his wife. Sarah, retired but still involved, sitting with her grandchildren. The new crew of Station 7, carrying on the tradition. When I walked into this fire station, I wasn't looking for a family. I was just looking for a safe place. But what I found was so much more. I found people who cared, who fought for me, who refused to give up on a scruffy little kid with too big clothes and too many worries. And because of them, I'm standing here today.
She paused, composing herself.
To everyone who has been part of this journey, thank you. To everyone who has reached out to a child in need, who has looked past the surface and seen the person underneath, thank you. To everyone who has shared their cookies, their time, their love, thank you. She raised her glass. Here's to the cookie connection, here's to community, and here's to the next 10 years. The crowd cheered, and music began to play. But before Emma could be swept up in the festivities, a small figure approached her. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, with tangled hair and clothes that didn't quite fit. In her hands, she carried a paper plate covered in plastic wrap. "Excuse me," the girl said, her voice barely audible. "I made cookies for the firefighters because they help people." Emma felt time fold in on itself, the past and present merging into a single moment of perfect clarity. She knelt down, just as Marcus had done all those years ago, so she was at the girl's eye level. "That's about the nicest thing anyone's done in a long time," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily," the girl replied. "Lily Chen." "Well, Lily Chen, I'm Emma. And on behalf of everyone here, thank you for these cookies." She took the plate gently, noticing the thin fingers, the wary eyes, the hopeful expression. "Would you like to come inside, meet some of the firefighters?" Lily looked at her with surprise, as if she hadn't expected the invitation. "Really?" "Really, you're welcome here, Lily, anytime you want." As Emma led the little girl inside, she caught Marcus's eye across the crowd. He was crying, not trying to hide it, and he raised his hand in a small wave. Emma waved back, then turned her attention to Lily, beginning the next chapter of a story that would never really end. Because that's the thing about kindness. It echoes, it ripples outward, touching lives in ways we can never fully anticipate or understand. A plate of cookies, a moment of courage, a community that chooses to see and to care. It was never just about the cookies. It was about the love. And in the end, that made all the difference. Years continued to pass, as years do. Emma married a kind man named Michael, who worked as a pediatrician and understood her mission in a way few others could. They had 2 children of their own, a boy named Marcus and a girl named Rachel, continuing the legacy of love that had defined Emma's life. Lily Chen, the girl who had appeared at the anniversary celebration, became the first official success story of the cookie connection. Like Emma before her, she had been living in a shelter, hiding from a world that seemed too big and too cold. And like Emma, she found her family in the most unexpected place. A young firefighter named Amanda, who had been inspired by Emma's story to join the force, took Lily under her wing. The parallels were almost too perfect, but life often works that way, repeating its patterns for those who are paying attention. By the time Marcus Williams celebrated his 80th birthday, the Cookie Connection had helped over 10,000 children find the support and resources they needed. Schools across the country included it in their curricula, teaching students about the power of small gestures and community connection. The birthday party was held at Station 7, of course. 3 generations of firefighters attended, along with social workers, community leaders, and families whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of one little girl's courage. Marcus sat in his favorite chair, watching the celebration unfold around him. Rachel was beside him, her hand in his, their love weathered but unbroken after more than 20 years together. "How does it feel?" Rachel asked, "seeing all of this?" Marcus considered the question. "Like a dream," he admitted. "Sometimes I still can't believe it. That little girl with her cookies. Who would have thought?" "She would have," Rachel said. "Emma always believed, even when she had no reason to." "She got that from you," Marcus said. Rachel laughed. "She got that from herself. We just helped her see it." Emma approached them, breaking away from a conversation with some of the newer firefighters. At 43, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had found her purpose and lived it every day. "Dad, there's someone I want you to meet," she said. She stepped aside to reveal a young man in his early 20s, dressed in a crisp new firefighter uniform. He had dark hair and earnest eyes, and there was something familiar about him that Marcus couldn't quite place. "Dad, this is Jake Sullivan. He just graduated from the academy, top of his class." The name clicked and Marcus felt his heart skip. Sullivan? Any relation to... "My grandmother was Rebecca Sullivan," Jake said. "Your wife's aunt. I'm Rachel's great-nephew." Marcus looked at Rachel, who was already crying. "We found each other through one of those genealogy websites," Emma explained. Jake had been researching his family history and discovered the connection. When he found out about you and Mom, about everything that happened, he decided to become a firefighter. Jake stepped forward, his voice steady but emotional. "I never met my grandmother, Rebecca. She passed before I was born. But she had a sister who had a daughter who married a man who raised a little girl who changed the world. I wanted to be part of that legacy." Marcus stood, his old bones protesting, and embraced the young man. "Welcome to the family, Jake, and welcome to Station 7. The party continued late into the night, with stories and laughter and more cookies than anyone could eat. But eventually, the crowd thinned, and Emma found herself alone with her parents in the quiet of the common room. "I've been thinking," she said, settling into a chair across from them, "about the book." For years, publishers had been asking Emma to write her memoir. The story of the Cookie Girl had become legendary, and everyone wanted the full, authorized account. Emma had always refused, feeling that her story wasn't just hers to tell. "I think I'm ready," she continued, "but I want to do it right. I want it to be about all of you, Mrs. Patterson and Derek and Sarah and James, about the shelter and the station and the community that saved me. I don't want it to be about me." Marcus smiled. "It's always been about you, Em, from the very first moment." "But it's also about us," Rachel added, "about what we built together, and I think that's worth sharing." Emma nodded slowly. "Then you'll help me? Tell me the parts I don't know?" "Of course," Marcus said. "We'll tell you everything, the good parts and the hard parts, the moments of doubt and the moments of hope, all of it." "All of it," Rachel echoed. And so they did. Over the following months, Emma sat with her parents, recording their memories and filling in the gaps of her own story. She interviewed Derek and Sarah, now grandparents themselves. She tracked down families who had been helped by the Cookie Connection and asked them to share their experiences. The book, when it was finally published, was titled A Plate of Cookies, the story of how one small gesture changed a community. It became an instant bestseller, translated into 37 languages and adapted into a documentary that won awards at film festivals around the world. But Emma's favorite review came from a local newspaper in Cedar Falls. It was written by a young journalist who had grown up in the town and remembered seeing Emma at community events when she was a child. "This is not a story about one exceptional person," the review read. "It is a story about what happens when ordinary people choose to care, when strangers become neighbors and neighbors become family, when a fire station becomes a home and a plate of cookies becomes a symbol of hope." Emma Sullivan Williams did not save herself. She opened the door, and a whole community walked through. That is the real lesson of this book. We are never alone. We just have to be brave enough to reach out. Emma cut out the review and framed it. It hung in her office at the shelter, beside a photo of her, Marcus, and Rachel on her wedding day, and a child's drawing of a fire truck that she had made when she was 8 years old. On the day Emma turned 50, she woke early and drove alone to the fire station. It was still dark, the autumn chill sharp in the air. She parked in the same spot she had stood all those years ago, a scared little girl with nothing but hope and a plate of cookies. The station looked different now, renovated and expanded to serve a growing community, but the essence was the same: the big red doors, the gleaming engines, the sense of purpose and protection. Emma pulled a plate from the passenger seat. She had baked them herself the night before, simple sugar cookies like the ones she had made as a child. They were slightly imperfect, the edges a little uneven, but made with love. She walked to the entrance and waited. A young firefighter appeared, maybe 25 years old, with the fresh-faced eagerness of someone new to the job. He noticed her and approached. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Emma smiled. "I brought cookies for the firefighters because you help people." The young man's expression shifted from confusion to recognition. His eyes went wide. "Wait, you're Emma Sullivan Williams. Oh my God, I grew up hearing about you. You're the cookie lady, the one who started everything." Emma laughed. "The cookie lady, I like that." She handed him the plate. "These are for the station. Share them with everyone, okay?" "Of course." "Yes, absolutely." He was stammering, starstruck. "Would you like to come inside, meet the crew? This would be incredible." Emma shook her head gently. "Not today. Today I just wanted to remember, to stand where I stood all those years ago and be grateful for everything that's happened since." The firefighter nodded, understanding somehow. "Thank you, Miss Williams, for everything. You changed my life, even though we've never met. You changed all our lives." "No," Emma said, her voice soft but firm. "I just showed up with cookies. Everyone else did the rest." She turned and walked back to her car as the sun began to rise, casting long golden shadows across Maple Street. Behind her, she heard the firefighter call out to his colleagues, excited and amazed. Emma didn't look back. She didn't need to. The past was the past. What mattered was what came next. And what came next was another day. Another chance to reach out, another opportunity to show someone they mattered. One cookie at a time. When Marcus Williams passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87, the entire town of Cedar Falls came to say goodbye. The funeral procession stretched for miles, led by fire engines from stations across the county, their lights flashing in silent tribute. Emma spoke at the service, her voice steady even as her heart shattered. "My father," she began, then paused. The words still felt miraculous, even after all these years. "My father was not the man who gave me life. He was the man who gave me everything else, a home, a family, a purpose. He saw a little girl with nothing to offer but cookies, and he saw potential, he saw worth, he saw someone worth fighting for." She looked at the crowd, faces she had known her whole life. That is the greatest gift anyone can give another person. Not money or resources or opportunities, though those matter too. The greatest gift is seeing someone truly, believing in them when they can't believe in themselves, and then doing something about it. She took a breath. My father ran into burning buildings for 40 years. He saved more lives than he could count, but the life he was proudest of saving was mine, and I will spend every day of my life making sure that gift was not wasted. The service ended with a 21-bell salute, the traditional firefighter farewell, and as the last bell echoed across the cemetery, Emma felt her father's presence one final time. Not a ghost, not a supernatural visitation, just a memory, warm and real. A big hand on her shoulder. A deep voice saying, "You're going to be okay, kid." And she was. Rachel outlived Marcus by 3 years, passing on a spring morning with Emma at her side. Her last words were about cookies. "Make sure there are cookies at my funeral," she whispered, "the good kind, with the colored icing." "I promise," Emma said, holding her mother's hand. "And Emma?" "Yes, Mum. Thank you for saving me." Emma leaned down and kissed her mother's forehead. "We saved each other, remember?" Rachel smiled, her eyes closing. The wisest. And then she was gone. Emma Williams continued her work until she was nearly 70, training a new generation of advocates and leaders to carry on the mission. The Cookie Connection had become an international movement, but its heart remained in Cedar Falls, at the shelter Mrs. Patterson had founded and Emma had transformed. On her last day as director, she walked through the building one final time, past the common room where children gathered for meals, past the kitchen where countless batches of cookies had been baked, past the offices where lives had been changed, one family at a time. She stopped at a small alcove near the entrance. On the wall hung a simple wooden plaque, weathered with age but still legible. In memory of Mrs. Patterson, who believed that baking was good for the soul, and in memory of all the children who found their way home. Emma touched the plaque gently, then turned and walked out into the sunshine. Her granddaughter was waiting in the car, a young woman of 22 who had just finished her degree in social work. The family legacy continued. "Ready, Grandma?" she asked. "Ready," Emma confirmed. As they drove away, Emma's granddaughter, whose name was Hope, asked a question she had asked many times before. "Tell me the story again, about the cookies and the fire station." Emma smiled. She never tired of telling it. "It was a Tuesday morning in October," she began. "The leaves were turning and there was a chill in the air. A little girl, scared and alone, walked up to Fire Station 7 with a plate of cookies in her hands." And as she told the same story that had been told in books and documentaries, in classrooms and training sessions, in homes and shelters around the world, she felt the weight of it, the miracle of it, the simple, profound truth of it. One small gesture, one moment of courage, one community that chose to care. That was all it took. That was everything. And somewhere, in fire stations and shelters and kitchens and homes, children who had been seen and believed in were growing up to see and believe in others. The ripples continued outward, touching lives in ways that could never be fully traced or measured. A plate of cookies. A world of difference. The end was really just another beginning. And the story, like love, went on forever.